If you're anything like me, you probably thought hedonism is basically me take drugs now. Me no care about tomorrow. Drugs are nice. But I read upon it and now I'm left thinking that deep down we're all hedonists. Hear me out. The Google definition of hedonism is as follows: the ethical theory that pleasure, in the sense of satisfaction of desires, is the highest good and proper aim of human life. And apparently, there are a bunch of different types of hedonism, but the one that caught my attention is prudential hedonism, because it says we should maximize pleasure and minimize pain long term. Meaning, it's okay to suffer now if we get pleasure later. And isn't that what we all do, or try to do? And if we fail at it, we're probably pursuing a more short term pleasure, like getting absolutely clobbered on a Sunday evening, even though we're working early Monday, which puts us in the more conventional ideas of hedonism. And if you're thinking, no, sir, you got it wrong, we mostly try to be happy, we don't chase simple pleasures, then let me present you with the hedonistic formula. I don't know if it's actually called that, I just made it up. It goes happiness equals pleasure minus pain. That's the equation. Therefore, if pain equals 0, then happiness equals pleasure. Meaning, the higher the pleasure and the lower the pain, the closer we get to happiness. I think that's what it means, at least. I don't have a math degree. So what do we really do willingly that we don't expect at some point in time will either increase our happiness or decrease our pain, really? I read upon some articles and had a few chats with Sir Mr. GPT, and it turns out a bunch of smart people actually made some good points on that. Here's a non-exhaustive list of things that were mentioned as what people value that isn't pleasure: health, self-improvement, post-mortem fame, altruism, with a couple of examples: pursuing one's child's happiness, sacrificing one's life for a greater cause, justice, friendship, truth, living in reality, finding meaning in life, producing noteworthy achievements, achieving perfection in certain domains, living in accordance with religious laws or moral laws. If, however, we look at those things from a prudential standpoint, do we not strive for those things to increase happiness and or decrease pain now or in the future? Health, self-improvement, producing noteworthy achievements, achieving perfection in certain domains, and finding meaning in life should be self-explanatory. Friendship, I think, should also be self-explanatory. Humans are social animals. We feel better in groups of like-minded individuals. Friends. They literally make the good times better and the bad times less bad. The reason I decided to mention friends separately is because sometimes we sacrifice for the good of our friends. But that's not hedonistic, is it? Well, I think it is. Or, at the very least, it can be viewed as hedonistic in the sense that we do it to increase our overall happiness. And I want to bunch that together with altruism. We do those things because it makes us feel good. Consider this. If someone who bullies you at school is in trouble and you can bail them out at your own expense, would you do it? Chances are you wouldn't. And even if you did, it would be because of some moral value that you hold, and I'll get to those in a bit. But why not, if altruism is valuable? I would say that's because when we do engage in altruism, it's either because it makes us feel good or because our chosen moral system demands it. Examples of altruism given above are pursuing happiness of one's child and sacrificing one's life for a greater cause. The happiness of our child is our own happiness. I think this one is also fairly obvious. But what about dying for a greater cause? Surely that's not hedonistic. Let's bunch that together with post-mortem fame. Consider this. Why do we require a great cause or post-mortem fame to be willing to die? And just as an aside, to my knowledge, suicide is usually done to prevent pain. In case you were wondering, what if someone decides to die when there's no greater cause or post-mortem fame involved? How can that be hedonistic? Well, here's how. You reduce pain. Back to post-mortem fame and greater good. Both of those fill us with joy as we live, and that's what pushes us to die for them. And if you're thinking, Nope, I would not die for post-mortem fame. Well, then you clearly wouldn't die for it. The people who value those things enough to die for them, well, they value them. Yep, I'm very smart. To them, the idea of being famous is so intoxicating, it's worth dying for. At least I don't imagine there's someone who doesn't care about being famous who decides to die so they can achieve fame in that. That just doesn't make sense to me. The same goes for the greater good. If we believe in whatever that greater good is so much that we're willing to lay down our lives for it, well, wouldn't we be happy to make sure that the greater good lives on if a life without that greater good is so bleak that we rather not exist in a world without it? Sure, in both cases we ignore the prudential part of prudential hedonism since we ensure that there will be no future for us. But I think there's still an argument to be made that, while not prudent, the act is still hedonistic in nature. If at this point you would argue that there is no one type of hedonism that covers all the presented allegedly hedonistic acts, you would be correct. That begs the question though, is this a failure of hedonistic ideals or a language failure? It is entirely possible we simply don't have a good way to describe hedonism in such a way that most of the time we're prudential in our pursuits of happiness, but sometimes we can't help ourselves and eat a whole bag of potato chips late at night even though we know it will make us feel awful later, because now it feels good. And sometimes we believe in a cause so much that we risk our lives for it, like defending our homeland from an invading force, because we want our family and friends and our fellow countrymen, and potentially ourselves if we survive, to live full and happy lives without having to suffer occupation or worse. I know this is a stretch, but in some way, the goal of all those things is increasing happiness and decreasing pain. It's only the boundaries around that general concept that change depending on circumstances. And I think that's normal. Anyway, justice, truth, reality, and religious or moral laws. Living in accordance with religious or moral laws can happen in two ways. Either we truly believe in those laws, or they are thrust upon us. If the latter is the case, and we still abide by those laws, I think it's obvious that we do that to avoid persecution, ostracizing, and or other unpleasant things. We do it to increase happiness and reduce pain now or in the future. But what if we wholeheartedly agree with those laws? I would say if that's the case, then we believe that whatever we gain from a society or a community that abides by those laws is a stable and agreeable environment in which to exist. And within a stable and agreeable environment, it is easier to work towards happiness and it is more difficult for pain from external sources to creep into our lives. At least I'm not aware of any set of moral or religious laws that doesn't achieve something of that sort within a community of practitioners. But feel free to correct me if that's not the case. Justice is more or less the same thing, really. If what we perceive to be justice is being upheld, that makes us feel safer within our community. Hence, we are less stressed and we have more opportunities to pursue happiness, and we believe, since justice will be served, that external causes of pain will be, well, brought to justice, whatever we believe that to be. Next up, truth. Why do we value it? I think it's the same reason as the ones I already mentioned, because it provides a stable environment. Do the following mental exercise. Imagine that you can't trust anything you're told, be it by the media, government bodies, or even co-workers, friends and family. Now, try the other way around. Imagine you have a reliable source of information that you can trust fully. That would be much better, wouldn't it? You wouldn't have to suffer uncertainty. You wouldn't have to worry about unknowns. You could focus on working towards happiness. Truth, justice, moral and religious laws, etc. The way I see it, those aim to provide an environment where we can practice hedonism. But what about living in reality? What does that even mean? Well, there is this thought experiment about an experience machine. I'll tackle that one in a separate video. Next objection. Why do we sometimes enjoy tragic, scary, sad, and so on stories? How is that hedonistic? That one's easy. Even ChatGPT knows. There's a range of reasons, like artistic appreciation, which means it was a well-crafted story and we enjoyed that. But for the most part, I think it's because it helps us process our own emotions, or because it's a safe environment where we can experience those difficult emotions and learn how to handle them better in the future. To reduce the pain those emotions are currently causing us, and or to reduce the amount of pain we will feel from them in the future. It's adaptive. Now, we get to the actually difficult thing to argue. Hedonism is a mental proposition. It claims that living according to hedonistic values, again that means maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain, is the only moral and good way to go about life. There's 2 points there. First, that we are morally obligated to optimize for, as per the happiness equation from before, happiness. Second, that this is the only thing we should consider. There is this term pluralist, which means the thing in question that we're calling pluralist can coexist with other things, and they can all be true at the same time. Hedonism, by definition, is non-pluralist. At least to my knowledge, that's the case. Let's start with the Google definition of the word moral. Concerned with the principles of right and wrong behavior. Who decides what's right and what's wrong? That's a topic for another discussion. There is no set of rules when it comes to that, as far as I'm aware. And if there is, let me know. That would be very useful. So, going with that definition and our own sense of right and wrong, I think the majority will agree that it is moral to seek to increase one's own pleasure and decrease one's own pain in a way that is prudent. Because remember, prudent basically means not at odds with the rest of society, as that would put us at risk of greater pain in the future. Yes, it's right for people to try and be happy without messing up other people's happiness. In fact, isn't that how we currently live? Or try to? Now, what's significantly more difficult is looking at the question from the opposite side. Is it morally wrong to do something that doesn't increase our pleasure or reduce pain? Frankly, I'm not sure how to answer that question, mostly because I'm not sure what such a thing would be. I can certainly say that what's moral in one place might not be moral in another place, as per the local values, and that could cause harm. But then, that's not an issue of people pursuing happiness, it's an issue of misaligned moral values between two communities/societies. So, given all the stuff about altruism, dying for the greater good, justice, truth, etc. that I said previously, what would even constitute an action that doesn't in some way reduce pain or increase happiness now or in the future? I don't know. Perhaps if any of you can think of something, again given the rest of the arguments presented previously, you can drop it in the comments and I can consider it. Next, non-pluralism. Is this the only way we should live? I'll have to leave this one in your hands as well. If we assume that consciously or subconsciously we strive to achieve greater happiness, either by increasing pleasure or decreasing pain, then what do we actually do that's not hedonistic? Here's the final argument, because arguing that we're intrinsically hedonistic beings is fine and all, but it doesn't get us anywhere. There's no point to that argument. Here's my question to hedonism. What's the point? What do we strive to achieve with this moral proposition? The way I see it, there's only one reason to consider it besides intellectual curiosity. Would it be valuable if society at large shifted to hedonistic mindset? Presumably, hedonists argue that it would be beneficial. In other words, if instead of saying deep down all we do is for hedonistic purposes, we ask the question, would the world be a better place if everyone consciously asked themselves if their actions will lead them to more happiness now or in the future? Here I should acknowledge that perhaps this was always the crux of the argument, and in ignoring that in my arguments, I have rendered them invalid. That may be so. But pretty much all of the arguments I read for and against hedonism boiled down to arguing and expanding definitions of words. I don't think what I did was much different to that. And if you disagree, I'd love to hear from you. Now, hedonism as a guiding principle of our actions from a moral standpoint. Go! Would life be better if everyone around us consciously worked towards increasing their happiness now and or in the future? Honestly, I think so. I think we already make those same calculations in our heads, we just don't recognize what the end goal is. I want my child to have a better future. Why? Well, it would make me happier. I might not think that in working towards a better future for my child, but if I were to stop and think about it, as per this thought experiment, I think I would realize it, and I would choose to work towards it anyway. But that wouldn't always be the case. I wouldn't always come to the same conclusion in this hypothetical world. How about this?
I'm going to study hard and become a lawyer.
Why?
So I can work as a lawyer and live a better life.
Okay, but would that make me happier? And for some people, the answer here would be yes. In which case, great, more power to them. Others would think about it and decide that yes, if only they achieve such and such and become a lawyer and earn a lot of money, then they would be happy. From what I've heard, most of the time, that's not correct. Those are not the right reasons to pursue anything. But at least those people thought about it. And there is a third group who would realize that
I just want money, but money is not happiness. Sure, it provides a nice cushion, and a certain amount of money makes happiness much easier to attain, but given the amount of time I will have to spend on becoming a lawyer and then working as a lawyer, if it's something I don't really care about, I don't think I'll be happy.
and boom, there's one person who adjusted their life trajectory for the better. As I noted, maybe that won't happen. But if we assume in this hypothetical reality that in order to have a conscious hedonistic equation for at least the more important decisions, because we can't do that for every decision, then at least people are more conscious about their choices. At least they consider things more deeply than they currently do. I think that's a good thing. As for whether people pursuing happiness would be a good thing for society in general, not just the individuals themselves, I would say that depends on the average person's ability to reason. And again, all of that is predicated on prudential view of happiness. If we can trust people to, at least most of the time, recognize when something is likely to turn around and push them in the face in the future, I do think it will be better. Happy people are better to be around than unhappy people. What do you think? How do you envision such a hypothetical society? Did I miss something? Am I wrong about something? Also, if you would like to see me talk about the experience machine thought experiment, check this video out. Alternatively, here should be my latest upload. If you're from the distant future and I kept uploading, it might be something you find interesting. That's it. Subscribe, bye. Thanks, bye. Subscribe, bye.